So originally, this video was supposed to be how far can you upgrade a Razer keyboard. I even bought a Razer Black Widow Chroma Tournament Edition for this specific project months ago, but then I realized there really isn't much you can do to this keyboard to make it better. You can add dampening foam, you can lube and film your switches, you can replace the switches, you can lube the co-star stabilizers, and you can also replace the keycaps. And these 5 things are the only things you can do to increase the sound quality of this keyboard. And of course, I'm not going to include all the superficial mods such as wrapping and spray painting the exterior. So this is the plate and PCB of the Black Widow Chroma TE, and as you can see, I've desoldered most of the switches and LEDs, and when I was lubing these switches, I had a thought. What would these Razer switches sound like at its full potential, lubed and everything, on a custom board? So instead, today we're going to be focusing on the question of how good are Razer switches, but we're only going to be focusing on the Razer Yellow switches. So why the Razer Yellow switches? Well, that's because I believe that the Razer Yellow switches are by far the best switch that Razer has ever made. Although Razer has been doing really well with their linear optical switches and analog optical switches, the basic switch structure of these mechanical switches and its flexibility, along with the specs that it gives us, are what make it superior among the line of other Razer switches. If the Razer optical switches had the same amount of flexibility to modding as their mechanical counterparts, then obviously the analog optical switches would come out on top. But we know that's not the case, and you are hard stuck with the sound that you were given right off the bat, and that's not very good, especially as an enthusiast. Although they're technically just recolored Greetech linear switches, the performance is what differs. The Razer Yellows have a 45 gram actuation force, a 1.2mm actuation distance, and a 3.5mm bottom out distance. Meanwhile, Greetech Red linear switches have the same actuation force but drastically longer travel times, making them not as good for gaming, which is the goal of the Razer Yellows. An interesting thing about the Razer switches is that it's very difficult to find them wholesale, and even if you do find them wholesale, they're very expensive at around $1 to $2 a piece, which is ridiculous considering Greetech switches cost around 30 cents a piece on average. Luckily, the closest comparison to the Razer Yellow switches are the MX Speed Silvers. They have the same actuation force, very similar travel distances, and they only cost 47 cents a switch on average. So if at the end of this video you want to check out some Razer Yellow switches, go check out some MX Speed Silvers instead. But let's listen to what the Razer Yellow switches sound like on the original board itself. Sounds pretty bad, right? Well, we're going to be fixing these switches up. The thing about taking switches off a Razer board is that you have to desolder 6 points. You have 4 for the LEDs and 2 for the switch itself. So if you desolder 25 switches, you're basically doing the same work as desoldering 75 switches. It's really annoying, but if you go slow, it'll all work out if you choose to do this. So these are the switches. You've got black housing, 4 holes for the LED wires, you've got a yellow stem, and a silver spring inside. Now right off the bat, these switches have really bad housing wobble that make clear Zeal houses look amazing. And another feature found on these switches is that the stem doesn't go all the way down, and the benefit is that it somehow makes the switch thockier when you bottom it out. These switches are also pretty scratchy, so of course we're going to have to lube these switches with some Crytox 205 Grade 0 and film them with Deskeys films. And because of the already light spring properties of this switch, putting lube on it will slightly reduce the actuation force, making them feel lighter. And after all that is done, we can hear what the switches sound like on the board. But of course, as an enthusiast, we gotta put these modded switches onto an actual board. So today we have the Melgeek Mojo 60 with a steel plate and Cat Alpha keycaps, and we're gonna see what it sounds like. We're going to first start off with a 10-second snippet of the raw switches, and then we'll move on to the modded switches. So after that sound test, I hope you guys can understand the huge difference between an off-the-shelf keyboard versus a custom-built one in terms of sound, despite them using the same switches. Granted, there's a huge price difference in the parts that are used for this build versus a Black Widow Chroma TE, but considering the prices of an off-the-shelf mechanical keyboard nowadays, for the same price or a similar price, you can get yourself a very nice looking and very nice sounding keyboard. You might be spending a little bit more on these custom keyboards than the off-the-shelf keyboards, but the typing experience and the sound quality is totally worth it. So I guess the conclusion is that Razer switches aren't that great to begin with, but they can be after lubing and filming them, which is the case for all switches, so there's actually no takeaway here. One thing I will stop you from doing is buying a Razer keyboard and trying to upgrade it with all these parts with lubing, filming, and putting dampening foam and buying keycaps, because it is not worth it. Spend your money and time elsewhere and build yourself your own custom keyboard. It's gonna look better, feel better, and sound better. So what's the whole point of this video? Honestly, I just want to show you guys how an off-the-shelf keyboard would sound like if we were to mod it for maximum smoothness and acoustic quality. Granted, it didn't sound that great in the end, but we did detour and decided to use the switches on a custom board, and I was delightfully surprised to feel how good the Razer switches could be and how well they could sound. It's all about putting the switches in the proper environment and they're gonna feel great and sound great. That's why we build custom mechanical keyboards. But that's been it. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.